Agency life, it's relentless. And anytime you think something's working, it will don't sit rest on your laurels, because it will stop working the moment you relax. Anytime you think all of the crises are over and all the fires are put out, just open your eyes and look around, because those fires will rage again twice as high.
Hello and welcome to Agency Acquisition and Exits. I'm your host, Peter Lang. Today I welcome Trenton Moss. He spent 15 years running his own agency until he sold it, then went off, did integrations, settled in the team and said, this is not the right fit for me, walked away from that company with good terms, good relationships, wrote a best-selling book about how to really enrich and develop people called Human Powered. He has a lot of stories about his agency journey from inception through that acquisition and then the post-acquisition integration. Not only is this going to be valuable for anyone who's being approached by prospective buyers, but also you can hear the steps you should take to maximize your exit. So let's dive in. Trenton, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, good to be here, Peter.
Help us get a feel for your agency life. You were in it for over a decade, right? 15 plus years.
Yeah, 15 years, yeah.
Yeah, tell us the background. How'd you get it started and what was the journey for you?
Yeah. Well, I started my agency around 20 years ago now, and it was a bit random, actually. I'd been abroad for a few years after university. It took about 3.5 years out to kind of travel and work abroad. And then I was coming home to start real life, and I had no idea what to do with myself. And then I suddenly had an epiphany we were in Beijing at the time, actually, about to get the Trans-Siberian train back to almost the UK, back to Europe. And I had an epiphany. I should start a user experience agency when I get home. So a few weeks later, I did get home and I did start a user experience agency. It was very random because I had no experience, I had no contacts, I had no money, I had no idea what I was doing. But I had a lot of enthusiasm and, I guess, grit and determination. So I started my agency not in my bedroom, because there wasn't space in the bedroom. I was in like a shared rental house. So there was no space in my bedroom for a desk. So I put a desk in the hallway and, bought a computer, got a dial-up internet connection. This is just only when broadband was coming out. This is 20 years ago. Got a phone and away I went. I made a website and just kind of did it, really. And, about a year later, things were going okay. So I moved out, got some desk space, hired a couple of people, and it went from there. And it became this 15-year roller coaster, where, managed to generally grow the agency. And we got to about £3 million turnover for 3 out of the last 4 years. And then we got acquired and I exited about a year and a half later.
What about the journey did you learn about your agency life? Because you were essentially an accidental agency owner, right? You traveled.
Yeah.
What I heard you say is you just jumped into it. You almost
just
reinvented the wheel completely. So what
I
are
had
some
no
of the
idea
lessons
what
to
I was
take away?
doing. Lessons to take away. Agency life. I mean, it's relentless, right? And anytime you think something's working, it will don't sit rest on your laurels, because it will stop working the moment you relax. Anytime you think all of the crises are over and all the fires are put out, just open your eyes and look around, because those fires will rage again twice as high. So it is just non-stop, and you're never more than 3 months away from bankruptcy, no matter how well you run your agency and how financially sound you are. You've no idea what work you're doing over the next few months. So it does take some getting used to, I think, the relentlessness of it, the uncertainty, the people constantly resigning, not because they're unhappy, but when you had a team of around 30 people, so every couple of months someone would resign, because that's just life when you got a team that size. And then you hire someone new and they don't work out, so you got to work out how for that. They're going to have to leave. And so there's just, or some client who's not happy, or some pitch that you don't win, and then you don't win 5 pitches in a row and you're like, we got nothing in the pipeline. It's just relentless, but it's fun as well, right? That's you got to like that kind of thing. If you want a more steady life, a more kind of with more reassurance and guarantee of security, then you don't go work in an agency, right? So yeah, a lot of fun, but
And
also
this is the journey
relentless.
of Web Credible,
Yes.
right? So we're talking
Yes.
Web Credible. You formed this agency, and you ultimately got it to a point of exiting.
Yeah.
So help us understand, when did the idea of being acquired or merging come to you, or when did the opportunity present itself?
Well, I always wanted to ultimately sell it, because who wouldn't, right? If you're running a business and you've got the opportunity to potentially secure your family's future, um, who's going to turn that down? So any founder that says I don't want to sell, I I personally, I'm skeptical. I'm always skeptical if someone says that, and maybe in part they don't want to, but I think deep down we all do. And I think the thing that stops us is three different fears. At least this is what stopped me for so long. There's the fear of, what am I going to do next? Because I'm completely unemployable and I'm so entrenched in this business. I have no idea what if I'm unemployable, I have to start another business, but I have no idea what I would do next. And what if that didn't work? What do I do then? And so there's all this big fear about, like, if I sell this and leave, I have no idea where I will go or what I could do. So I think that's the number one fear. And that was certainly a fear of mine. The number two of three fears is, I think I had this, is, if I do sell the business, what will my team think of me? That they're all going to hate me, because they've all joined this business kind of on my promise. The culture, we're a small business, so the culture is kind of an extension of my personality. And we've got a vision for the business and a mission and all of these and these values that we stand for. And it feels to me like, if I was to sell, like, they're just going to look at me and hate me and say, you're a traitor. Like, this is awful what you're doing. So that's my second fear. And then my third fear, because the exit, the selling the agency, that's your exit, right? And so once you've been running an agency for a long time, and I had this, and I don't know if you're listening and you're running your agency, if you can secretly admit to this, but after about 10 years of running my agency, I just saw my prison walls, my jail walls, getting higher and higher and higher. And the longer I was in the agency, the more I felt trapped. And so the third fear about trying to start a sale process is, what if no one wants to buy us? What if I go through that process of trying to get acquired and no one's interested and no one's willing to do it? Am I stuck here forever? And it's those three fears that, well, at least for me, that stopped me ever really admitting that I wanted to sell or ever doing anything about it. And the only reason that we ended up making a sale happen, we'd get approaches, there were always people knocking on our door saying, hey, we're interested in buying. I don't know, the number of people that sell their agency because someone has just knocked on their door and said, hey, here's a whole bunch of money, let me buy you. It just doesn't happen. I think if you want to sell your agency, you kind of have to make it happen yourself. So I never made it happen for 14 odd years. And then something happened that changed that. So after about 14 years, we had a very difficult period in the agency. We had we had 6 months of consecutive losses. So we lost hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of thousands. It was horrendous. And obviously, Peter, you're looking at me. You can see that I've still got hair, and it's not even that grey. So I've no idea how that happened. I've no idea how I held onto my hair during that period and how it didn't go grey. But it was awful. I mean, just beyond awful. I was tired anyway after 13, 14 years of running the business. And I guess that period, I was going to say it's the straw that broke the camel's back, but I think it's more like, you know what, we really want to break this camel's back. Let's not put a straw in it. Let's throw bale of hay upon bale of hay on this camel's back so we can really break it. So that was utterly horrendous. I don't know how to describe how awful it was. I had a couple of panic attacks in that time, which I've never had before, never had since. It was so awful. And my kids were quite young then, and they weren't sleeping. They chose, both of them just chose that kind of year to be the year of not sleeping. So it was bad. Anyway, by the end of that 6-month period, this guy I know messaged me and said, hey, do you want to go for lunch? He's an M&A guy, and he's like, I've just joined a new firm, setting things up there. Let's go for lunch. I was like, fine. So we had lunch, and I'm crying into my soup, right? I can barely eat. I'm so stressed out. I'm just like, I can't do this anymore. Just give it away. I was like, I don't care. I don't care what happens. I can't do this anymore. And he said, look, you've been going for, before this bad period, you've got 13 years under the belt, 13 financial years under the belt. Before now, you've grown every year, you've been profitable every year, apart from 2008. If you can just turn this around a bit, we can do something here. You've got a great proposition, great business, great reputation. There's a lot of good stuff here. So we can definitely do something. So that's why I started the sales process, because I'd had enough. I was just absolutely done.
I heard you say you built your own prison. And oftentimes
Yeah.
entrepreneurs, especially ones who are accidental entrepreneurs, don't realize that to constantly beat your head against the ceiling of growth, the uncertainty of the humans you surrounded yourself with, the clients, your team, you're essentially locking yourself into a prison of your own making. And to free yourself,
Oh,
or at
yeah.
least to think you can be freed from that, is like leaving the body of your potential. It's hard. It's such a limiting belief that most founders can't overcome. And it took a breaking point for you and for many
Yeah.
to say, I've had enough and I'm going to take my business to market, or I'm gonna get rid of it. And I often say the reason why businesses are for sale is because someone is done with it. You don't
Yeah.
sell things you're not done with.
Yeah.
And so it comes to a time, whether it be a financial windfall that's better than your current situation, or you've just had enough. That's a big reason why a lot of companies are sold. Now,
Yeah.
you went through a formal sale process. I mean, you spoke to someone with M&A background. Uh, what did that look like? What did they help you prepare for? And how long was that process?
Yeah, so it was about 9 months from me crying in my soup to the sale process actually happening. And I mean, two things happened during that time. So, or two things worth talking about. Um, One which isn't related to the sales process. Let me tell you about that one first. One's related to the business performance. So, just as we started, the first month after that 6 months of loss making, we broke even that month. So the loss making finished. So me and my leadership team had a massive celebration. Yay, we didn't lose money this month. We're drinking water, right? Because there's no money to buy anything. I mean, we were stripped bare down to the bones as a business. And then this amazing thing happened for the next 8 or 9 months. The reason we had this loss-making period was that new business fell off a cliff. We had a 60% decline in revenue from new business. So we put this proactive new business plan together, and that's what I basically spent those 6 months doing, just killing myself, trying to make that happen. And it paid off, because what happened then, we broke even first month after the 6 months of losses, and then the next month we made a profit. Revenue went up by a bit. And the next month revenue went up by a bit more, and we made another profit. And the next month revenue went up. And I'm not exaggerating, for 9 months in a row, revenue increased. And profit increased with it. And by the ninth month, we were hitting our highest ever revenue on a 40% net margin. And we sold a week after that month end. So we recovered all of those losses because the business was absolutely flying by the time the sale actually happened. So that was one thing that happened. So although the sale got triggered by me being like, I'm done, the business is failing, with a bit of, as a result of a bit of luck and, well, I guess a lot of hard work, we turned it around. And so it wasn't a distressed sale in the end. And actually, as we were having conversations with potential acquirers, there was this really great story to tell of, look, they've had this awful 6 months, but look at the resilience that they've shown. This is the reason why those 6 months were so bad, because new business fell off a cliff, and there were plenty of reasons why that happened. And here's what they've done about it. And look, here's the results that are coming through now. And look at the 13 years of financials where things are actually never like this. This is the first time it had ever happened. So it created a really compelling story, actually, for people. So it kind of worked in our favor, having that bad period. So that was the first kind of thing that happened. Oh, sorry.
Well, question, was it the fact that you had made the decision to sell the business that gave you greater purpose to generate the new
No,
business,
it
or
was
what was it?
it was the work we did in that 6 months to build up the pipeline. So one of the main things that I did, one of the biggest things, was I launched a couple of communities for director level people, brand side. They were very successful. So every month we get about 30 of our target client in the office doing like a round table with us, literally every single month. And then every single month we were reaching out to about 200 or 300 of them to keep inviting them to these round tables. And we won so much work off the back of that, and various other things that we did. But we won big brands. So I don't know if you know, here in the UK, brands like Tesco, Vodafone, obviously global. We won Visa, Royal Bank of Scotland. Yeah, we won big, meaty client work off the back of this program, and we didn't have to pitch to any of them. So it wasn't just that we won work, but it was like it just started straight away. So, and then various other things we did. We had an advisory board who was super helpful, because before this period, we'd never done proactive new business. So we'd just grown organically off, word of mouth and, usual standard marketing tactics that everyone does, but never kind of outbound kind of proactive new biz. And that had worked for 13 years. And then that tap of the constant influx of inbound inquiries, it turned off. And when I say overnight, I'm not sure if I'm exaggerating. It just stopped. And our decline in new business wasn't because we were losing pitches, it's because we just weren't pitching.
Wow.
And the reason it all turned around afterwards was because of the hard work in those 6 months. So those 9 months when, I knew, well, I was thinking we might sell, because I didn't know if it would happen, right? You never know.
Yeah.
And then obviously as time went on, it looked closer and closer to having it. I was kind of re-energized again because things were going better with the business, but also it's kind of like, in some ways I was an autopilot, because it was all flowing. The only problem was new business. Other than that, I had an amazing leadership team. I had an amazing structure. We were doing amazing work. We had really happy clients. Everything was in place. And I remember that the year before, this terrible year, once we got everything ready, we were like, oh my God, this year, we're going to be flying. And then new business fell off a cliff.
Yeah, the number one discount factor of agencies and businesses in general is the lack of predictability within new business. If you can live and survive for a decade or longer off of referrals, inbound, the brand equity you've developed in the community or within your segment of clients, fantastic for running the business that way and building something that you enjoy. But that's not something someone else wants to buy. Like part of your attractiveness on your exit here was the fact that you built a predictable pipeline that the acquirer gets to reap the benefits of. And another question we get asked all the time is, when's the right time to sell? Like, you could have been tempted to keep it going because you fixed it, it's growing, and it was working.
Yeah.
But now
we
you
were
have
flying.
the ability to sell that upside, that story, to the partner, to the buyer, which is a really key aspect of doing deals. Your job is to quantify how the buyer is going to get a multiple return off of buying your business. And you were able to show that by having one of the number one discount factors resolved. So you built this turnaround engine. You were able to wipe clean 6 months of turmoil and depression and let's just call it awfulness of life that comes with this. And throughout your reemergence, like a phoenix, you're being courted. How many prospective buyers did you talk to during that time?
So we probably talked to 10, 15, something like that. So, the broker obviously would get signed up with them. They write a little teaser, which I give feedback on. Then they go out and try to talk to people, and I help them to kind of choose certain, I'd kind of point them in the right directions of places they could find the right sort of buyer, because we were a user experience specialist. So it was obvious to me that we would sell to a development company, someone kind of specializing in IT mostly, because there was a lot of UX businesses were selling to more traditional IT companies, because IT companies had historically been very much kind of sell an IT project, what the client wants, hand it over to delivery, and the delivery does the work, and no kind of strategy, no kind of like, being a leader to the client, just taking orders. And they were all looking to change that model. That model was becoming outdated, and they all needed kind of, user experience and strategy and research and design that we did. Hence, lots of us were being bought up. So it was obvious to me that that was the sort of business that would be good for us.
And
So
you
we
touched on
caught it.
something. Trent, I want to highlight this. You knew a narrative for the prospective buyer. Like
Yeah,
you knew your fit. That's
yeah.
leaps and
You have to.
bounds above
You have
most
to.
people.
Oh, really?
Most
Oh,
people
well,
who
you
are
have to. It's
trying to
kind
go
of
to market,
obvious to me
they go,
anyway.
I don't know who's going to buy me. I don't know who we're a right fit for. And it's so disappointing because the number one thing you can do as a prospective seller is know who's the ideal fit as a
Yeah.
known buyer, because the buyers are buying companies just like you. We buy companies of certain size, type, in industry and service capability. So it's out there who's being bought up. And so all you have to do is say, who looks like me, who's being acquired? And that's what you did, which is a fantastic way to support a formal sale process.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, it just seems so obvious to me. Like you have to have a niche. Like if you're trying to be everything to everyone, no one's interested in you unless you're doing EBIT of 1 million or more, and then they'll buy you for your profit essentially and nothing else. But if you're not doing 1 million EBIT, then they're going to buy you because you fit a hole that they have, and that's a hole in either a specific skill set capability. So in our case, that was user experience, or because you have a certain sector specialism that the company wants to get into, or whatever that hole might be. So I don't know. For me, it's really obvious. If you're running a business, you need to niche it.
And then understand where your niche fits into their need.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's exactly it.
So you had
So
10,
so yeah.
10
So we
prospective buyers.
yeah, something like that. 10, 15 that we chatted to.
How many got
Um,
close to like they seem interesting?
oh, well, three. Went to three kind of final offers. So
And
in the end, it was about three. So three of them put their offers in, and it wasn't just about the money. It was also about, well, what's this going to look like, right? So like one of them came from a business that I thought was the one we were going to go with because we'd partnered with them for a while and we were very close to them. So we knew each other very, very well, but it was completely the wrong fit. Like it was going to be like an aqua hire type thing. And we would have my agency would have been almost just disintegrated from the off, and everyone would have just disappeared into that bigger business. And that it wasn't right. It wasn't right for the team. No, then people really would have said to me, "What are you doing here?" So that was definitely wrong. And then another one was kind of interesting, but they it's really random this. It was like they just weren't based in London, and that's what put me off. So they wanted us to we were in London, they wanted us to be the London office, and they were based, I think, in Leeds and somewhere else. And the final one I liked because they were based in London. We were going to integrate fully with them. I was going to have a position on the board there, and we could become one company. We could really become one company. And for me, that's where the value of this came, because to be fair, it was becoming increasingly difficult to just operate in a user experience niche, because more and more brands were saying, well, if you do all the strategy and research and design, well, I have to find someone to build it then. And we could say, oh yeah, we'll bring in a partner, but it was not the same. So we didn't. I think we needed to be joined up with someone, and so the third one was, it felt the best one. They seemed culturally, kind of similar. It wasn't a perfect fit, and I don't think you can get a 100% perfect fit. I don't think that's possible. There were certain things about it that weren't right, but I think it was good enough. And what I liked about them was that they basically wanted to take our business and put it front and center of their proposition. So it's like they're doing IT and development, and their proposition basically became our proposition. And oh, by the way, we also do development, even though that was like 80% of the company. So we like the idea of that. So yeah, we went with them. So it went to final offers. Lots of negotiating back and forth before then about the terms with everyone. Um, and you just kind of have to use your common sense and like try and view like any negotiation. You're just like, well, let's just find a win-win here, right? What is it that you're
yep.
looking for here? What do you need? What are you concerned about? Okay, here's what I'm concerned about. How do we get around this? And obviously lawyers are involved, and the broker's involved, but you just have a conversation and you're like, right, well, here's my concerns, here's your concerns. How do we come up with something? And you can put whatever you want in the contract. I got all sorts of random clauses put in there, based on certain concerns. We had a payment plan, and I was like, well, what if you don't pay on time? Well, I don't know. And I said, right, if you don't pay on time, I want this consequence and this consequence in there. So they were like, yeah, fine, we'll put them in because we'd like to pay on time. So you can
Who
kind of get whatever you want in the contract.
So from your side, who is involved? You got the heads of terms. Um,
Yes.
uh, when you received it, how did that structure get broken down? Obviously, there's a cash component. You were merging into a new entity, so I'm assuming there was a function of equity in the new business potentially. What
Yeah,
was that
yeah,
structure? And then who was involved in your team during those discussions?
yeah. So it was, I mean, it was mostly me, and then my leadership team, I involved them. So that my leadership team had about 10% of the business, and I had the other 90%. Um, so they were involved a bit. My MD was involved a bit, and my other rest of my leadership team a bit, but it was mostly me. They got to meet them. Um, and then who was involved? So my kind of my assistant, which is did a lot of stuff in the business. She was very talented. She did all the due diligence actually, along with my finance director. So I didn't really get involved in that actually, in the due diligence much at all. They worked really hard actually, which was I was very grateful to them for the effort that they put in. I mean, once we got heads of terms, it was kind of plain sailing. It was just do the due diligence and a few final dotting the i's and crossing the t's, but yeah, I think it was about 4, 5, 6 weeks, something like that. But it was pretty non-eventful, to be honest, in that time. It was more just me chatting with my new boss, other people from my leadership team meeting their leadership team, us talking about how things would work, kind of more interesting parts, because obviously the financials were agreed. So I had a bit of equity. I think the deal was about 20 odd out of everything, 20% equity, I think 80% cash. They wanted an earnout originally. Originally, they put a 3-year earnout in, and again, you could just have conversations. I just called them up and we're like, "Why are you doing an earnout? Like, if you do an earnout, then we have to stay separate." And it was a 3-year earnout. It's like, well, we have to stay separate for 3 years. What's the point in doing this? The value here is in integration. So they went away and thought about it and came back. And my boss, who became my boss, said, "Yeah, you're right. Actually, let's just do a 1-year earnout." And I said, "That's fine. I'm, not a problem. But just so you know, all I'm going to care about in the first year is hitting that revenue target. So you putting that clause in means we have to stay separate. And anything that you want me to do around integration, you're pointing me away from that and you're pointing me towards hitting that revenue target. And I can tell you now, I will do nothing that is not going to help me hit that revenue target." And this was a polite conversation. I might be saying it a bit blunter than what I said it, but that was the gist of it. So, he went away and chatted with his guys, and eventually they came back and said, "Look, let's get rid of the earnout. We want to integrate. That's where the value's at." So there
Yeah.
wasn't an earnout. It was staggered payment, but there was no earnout element. And that was the right thing, by the way, because the value came in the integration. So putting an earnout in would have been stupid.
And show me the incentive, and I'll show you the decisions. If you're going to be incentivized for an earnout,
Yeah.
well, then it's going to reprioritize where you spend your time, where you think the best contribution to the overall business is. It's really important to have not just culture fit and alignment, but mutual incentives that are accretive and positive for the whole company, not just the
Yeah, and that's
individual
aligned
transaction.
around the overarching objective. And the objective here is for us to integrate to have a joined up offering to our clients. So you can't so there's your overarching objective. This is common sense again. Like it's obvious. You have an overarching objective, and then everyone's goals, regardless of whether you're buying a business or not, everyone's goals come off that overarching objective. And having an earnout was completely against the overarching objective. So they were right to get rid of it, even though it meant I wasn't tied in, basically. So I guess they're taking a risk with that none of us are then tied in. And also they accidentally forgot to give me an employment contract for about 9 months. So, and I never had an employment contract because I never gave myself one. So I mean, in theory, I could have left off the day I signed and just walked, but that would have been not very not very good.
No, that hurts your
Bit
relationship capital
unethical.
and your
Yeah,
reputation quite a bit,
no, yeah, yeah,
especially if
no,
you're
that
just
was never
dealing
going to
in
happen.
London. You'd
Yes,
have to move.
yeah, no, that would have
Uh,
been bad.
so
But
you got the heads of
but
terms.
yeah,
The heads of terms started with an earnout where they were trying to say we're incentivizing you to get more value, but you have to hit these performance thresholds. You said, whoa, 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 whoa. That is not conducive with the collaborative integration and value add we've been discussing. So they went off and they said, all right, we don't disagree with this. We'll do guaranteed payments, and but oftentimes there is an adjustment. So they were potentially going to give you an upside with an earnout, where if you hit a revenue target, you get paid out, maybe an increase in value. Was it a threshold or was it pure guarantee payments?
No,
Did you get
just
more
guaranteed.
EBITDA?
No, it was just guaranteed. It was a multiple of revenue in the end. So it was just that, and it was just staggered to support their cash flow essentially.
Unpack that for someone who doesn't have experience in
Oh,
transactions.
often, I think most agency sales are done as a multiple of your profit, EBIT. But this one wasn't. It was done as a multiple of our revenue. So it was just an amount, and it's like that's what it will be. And because there were no revenue targets, because we were going to integrate quickly, you couldn't have them. It was just based on the previous revenue, the last year's revenue. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward.
How big was the company that acquired you?
They're about five or six times bigger than us in revenue. So we were 3 million, and they were between 15 and 20.
How was that as a fit for you size wise? Did you think that was
It's
an
Yeah, it was a
appropriate
good fit.
percentage?
Yeah, because for every kind of 5 developers you have, you want one UX person or whatever the real 3 to 1 or whatever it might be. You need more developers than user experience people, put it that way. So no, the fit was great from a general cultural perspective, because they were an independent agency. So again, you can have a nice culture, not like a network agency with lots of rules and red tape. So that was good. The size of them compared to us, I think was good. There were some things that weren't quite right. They did a lot of e-commerce and we did hardly any. And the user experience that we did was quite strategic stuff that we're doing, which doesn't really fit with e-commerce that well, because e-commerce is much more around just like optimization. There's not that much strategy around it. It's just just lots of optimization, tweaking things, which wasn't really us. So that wasn't a good fit. That was one of the main things that wasn't such a good fit. But that wasn't the end of the world. Like I said, I don't think you'll find a perfect business. Yeah, and also they didn't really understand user experience as a business, which was a bit challenging. But why would they? They'd never really done it.
And that's why they wanted you too. Of
Yeah,
course,
yeah.
right? Part of the value was the strategic business contribution you had to expanding the client base and value. The fact that they don't know the industries or don't know the specific topics is kind of a known factor. When you
Yeah.
when you look back, typically we say an acquisition from a buyer's perspective should be 30% their current size. And that's relatively about where you sat, which meant it's softer landing for integrations. They were able to assimilate you into a hopefully more mature community and culture, and then maybe even have some transaction experience. So it's a very important target when you're on the buy side. Now, this wasn't their first transaction, right? They had done an acquisition before.
They've done a few, I think 7 or something, but nothing at our scale, nothing close to that.
Do you think that was a positive, the fact that they had experience doing transactions before versus maybe a first time buyer?
Very leading question, Peter. I guess so. It's hard to, it's hard to say because I've only done one of them. I guess, look, it's got to be a positive because they've got more of an idea of how to integrate us. But on the flip side, they've never done one at the scale of ours, and also something that they didn't understand. So the other ones that they bought before were all other development businesses, so they understood that more, whereas they didn't understand how user experience work. And also, our level of maturity around business development and marketing and the way we kind of did that was quite different to how they did it. And as we started to integrate, it became harder and harder for us to do that for various reasons. So that was a challenge. I mean, there's always teething problems, right? There's always teething problems when you integrate. It all sounds great on paper, and then you get into the detail, the nuts and bolts, and you find misalignments. But then you kind of work to fix those. So to be honest, I can't talk an enormous amount about the actual integration because my managing director led on it all. So something happened after we sold. It was that, well, first of all, she was always going to lead on the integration because she's incredibly talented. and really one of the most exceptional people I've ever worked with. So she was always going to be better at that than me. But the other thing that happened is that after we sold, I had nothing left, and I was running on pure adrenaline. And after the sale happened, within a day or two, I realized I don't want to be here anymore. And it hit me, and I never intended for that to happen. I was always planning to stay for around 4 years. We were planning on doing taking the kids out of school and going backpacking with the kids, and that was always going to be after about 4 years because of the age we wanted them to be. I did it last year, by the way, so it did happen. So I was always going to. The plan was to stay with them for 4 years and then leave and do this big backpacking trip, which I told them at the time about. And I couldn't within a couple of days, literally a couple of days. It's like how everyone gets ill at Christmas, right? We're just like running on empty until we get to Christmas. Just pure adrenaline gets us there. And Christmas, the holiday period happens. We take a bit of time off work and we all collapse and then we get ill. And it was kind of like that. I was just running on pure adrenaline after 15 odd years by that time. And the acquisition happened and I was done. I didn't have the energy for it. And I thought I would be re-energized because I thought joining a bigger business where I was on the board, would be really interesting. I'll get to learn some new things, see how things are done at that scale. And all I saw when I got inside that business, it was all the same problems that we had in my agency, all the same, just on a bigger scale. And I was just like, why do I want to deal with this? Why? That's of no interest to me. I thought I'd left that behind. And now I'm coming into the same thing, but on a larger scale.
Yeah.
And so within a few days, I realized this isn't going to work for me. I don't want to be here.
What did your new boss say when you were coming to him saying, thank you. I love this place for my team, but it's not for me.
Yeah. So I didn't say that at the start. So I kind of, to be fair, not a huge amount happened for the first 6 to 9 months. So we moved in with them after about 9 months, but before then, there wasn't a huge amount of change. So it was kind of business as usual, and I was just kind of like just carrying on as normal, albeit with a few meetings with the bosses and a few bits of collaboration as we're gradually getting closer. My MD was doing all the planning work around making it happen, and she did a tremendous job, really fantastic job. So it was kind of okay for the first 6 months or so. And then as we kind of started integrating more, there wasn't really a role for me anymore because we were becoming one business. And whilst my boss, who was very good, he really tried to create a role for me, I just wasn't interested, because it's a bigger business, you end up kind of specializing more. And he was kind of trying to create this job that was basically me just doing new business. And new business is all right, but I don't want to do that as my only thing. I like doing new business, but I don't like doing 100% of that. I like doing a mix of things. So I just had no interest in the role that was available to me. I had no interest in dealing with the problems that they had, standard agency problems, but just on a bigger scale to what I was used to. So after about 9 months, I did start talking to my boss and saying that, this isn't really for me. I don't really have a role here. It's just not really the right place, not right fit anymore. And he really wanted me to stay. Like I think he saw real potential for me in their business, which, I didn't share that sentiment, unfortunately. So that conversation carried on for about 9 months with me basically just saying, I don't really want to be here anymore. And by the end of it, for the last 2 or 3 months, I was saying, I hate it here. You pay me so much money and I do so little work because there's nothing for me to do anymore. We should finish this. You just made me redundant. You don't even need to give me a redundancy payout. And that went on for about 2 or 3 months. So I got very blatant by the end with saying that, really, because we integrated. And so there just wasn't a role for me. Plus, I didn't, as I said, I had no energy left. So I ended up kind of winding down my involvement that year. That was 2019. So I started off that year working full time. And by the end of it, I wasn't doing very much. But I would have gladly left a long time before then. But for whatever reason, my boss, well, good on him. He wanted to make it work. And yeah, it couldn't.
Since you weren't tied to any real stay bonus or earnout, and some key members of your team had 10% of the business that was acquired, how did the team, the key people, fend and make money during this transaction? How did the buyer
Same as me.
retain them? So they got
Oh, I
paid
see.
out.
They got paid out the same as me. The payments came out and they got 10% between them. I got 90% every time they came out.
Good.
So no, they weren't, there was nothing, there were no handcuffs to them. So we all three of us, my MD stayed a bit longer. Three of us all left at roughly the same time, maybe within a year of each other. But that was fine. We were all integrated, so it was no problem. And then my MD stayed on a bit longer. I mean, she ended up running the whole UK operation. She did incredibly well for herself there. So no, they didn't, and no one really left. It was a bit of a weird one actually, because we had an incredibly stable team in the run up to the sale. A really good team. My team it was the strongest team I ever had. We were really high performing, and we hadn't been many occasions in the past, but in that period in the run up to sale, we were an incredibly high performing team. Um, and you know, when like in a business, when like you had a really solid team for 2 or 3 years and you know that you're due a mass exodus, right? One person's going to resign just because, they've been there a while and, time to try something new. Well, good on you. And the moment one person does that, they all fall like dominoes. And within a year, it's like you've got a new business because you've had to replace like 2/3 of the team. And that's just standard. So we were due one of those. And then we announced the sale and no one really left for the next 9 months or so, because I guess they were waiting to see, well, what happens when we integrate? Let's stick around and see what goes on. And nothing happened. We didn't integrate for another 9 months. So then we integrated, and then I think people were probably thinking, well, now we've integrated, let's see what happens again. So they all stayed for another like year or so after that. And then when 2020 came around, I suspect people were thinking of then going, because okay, now I had people there for like 5 years by that time, and agency life, I don't know. I think 5 years is generally long enough for most people in one business. And then COVID hit, so no one left. So they ended up with this incredibly stable team for a few years. So they did very well out of it. It was the acquisition was very successful for them. And my boss said this to me. I caught up with him after a while, and it was very successful for them. They ended up selling to Havas
Yep.
about 2 years ago. And in my opinion, I don't think they'd have been able to sell to Havas if they hadn't have bought us.
Yeah. You just, if I were to translate or cipher what you just said, oftentimes the people who work in agencies only want to be there for 2 to 5 years. If they stay any longer, there's something wrong with them. You only really have good talent for a short period of time. And so when it's at its best, people think, oh, it's going to be this way forever. And they want to go to market, they want to sell, they want to make a structural change to the business. They're fearful that they can't, because now they got their good team finally. But it's always going to happen. You're always going to have an exodus. You're always going to have that turnover if you have quality people. Now, what you had as a fantastic advantage was a transaction is a change. They almost get a new job
Yeah.
somewhere else without having to change laptops, bosses, show up to a different Zoom or a different office, right? They get to experience a new thing without having to really move very far. And that is a fantastic opportunity for young talent or for talent in general to get more career experience. Transactions
Yes.
open the door for them, give them new entry points. And then the fun part, you actually protected them by doing a transaction into a bigger company right before COVID. You gave them a safe haven during COVID, right? Versus
Yes.
a
Well,
small company. Like you were doing
yeah.
in-person
No, for sure.
business
It would have been
development.
much harder.
Like
Yeah. No, I
that
agree.
was probably going to be a challenge in 2020, right? So like if anything, like
Probably.
you were in a huge contribution to these people's lives. You put them in a better home that gave them greater security during one of the biggest like life-changing
Yeah.
events to happen in the last few decades. And so you have a lot to be proud of the opportunity your
Thank
transaction
you.
gave them.
No, I agree with that. And it's interesting because as I said earlier, one of the 3 fears I had about selling was like, what is everyone going to think? Are they going to think I'm like just some asshole who's selling out and they've done all the work and I'm getting all the reward? And it was the exact opposite. And I was very taken aback, actually. So the, there was the reaction of my leadership team, there was the reaction of the whole business. So when we went to sign, I remember this, it was on a Thursday evening in the summer, and we went to the solicitor's office. It was about 7 p.m. and we're all signing, it's taking ages. And then we finished the signing, it's all done. And me and my leadership team went out and we went to go to a nice bar to celebrate and drink some champagne. And I was so emotional. I mean, it's like, 15 years with the kind of the last year of all of that incredible roller coaster at the end, a roller coaster like I'd never experienced. And I was so emotional. And it was just like, it's just this feeling of like, I've done it. Like, that's it. It's completed. And it's an incredibly rewarding feeling to have that, to be like, I've done it. I've brought this to a conclusion, as in my thing. And so we came out of the lawyer's office and we're just walking down the street towards the hotel bar. And my team, my leadership team, are there with me, and they are just jumping up and down, like with excitement, just jumping up and down, and just being like, "Oh my God, this is so amazing! Thank you so much, Trenton, for bringing us on this journey. Oh my God!" And they were so excited, and I'll never forget that feeling. And I was there, and I just stopped in the middle of the road, it's like a pedestrian road, and I just stopped in the middle of the road, and they were there, and I was so taken aback, and I was like, "Guys, you've got to stop!" Like, you know, they did, they got some money out of it, but I got a life-changing amount of money. And I said, guys, you have to stop. Like, you will never understand the level of gratitude I have to you guys. You're jumping around here saying thank you to me. That's wrong. I can never thank you enough for what you've done, essentially for me, and for this situation to happen. But they were so excited, so I was very touched. And then we went and we kind of got drunk some champagne, and my broker joined us, I'm still friends with my broker. He's a brilliant guy. We got on so well. And then the next morning we announced it to the team. We had this, like, every Friday we did this like skills session. So we were getting everyone together at 9 a.m. anyway. So it was like, well, we'll hijack that and we'll just announce it. So we had to get in the office at like 7:30 all hungover and like make the presentation. And so we stood up and me and my MD kind of talked through, what was happening basically. And again, I was so worried about what the team would think, so worried. But I needn't have been, because we explained what we were doing and why we were doing it and how we felt it was a good opportunity for the business, which was the truth. And everyone was like, yeah, well, we trust you as a leadership team. We trust you guys. You've always done right by us and you've generally looked after us. So it's all good. And then everyone just went back to work. So and then it was fine. So I was incredibly taken aback by the reaction of everyone.
And it's not as scary as we often think it's going to be.
No,
right?
No, it's part of life's journey. And I had a really amazing advisory board supporting me. And I had some really big heavy hitters on my advisory board. So I had the head of WPP for the whole of the UK on my advisory board. She runs 15,000 people. And I had the head of a global marketing agency called Iris, with the founder and CEO. He started it in his kitchen. It's now a 2,000 person global business. And those two in particular were really amazing, especially Ian, the guy who ran Iris. Just so supportive, because I'm going through this. Well, first of all, we went through the loss-making period, in which they helped us no end. They were incredibly supportive. They really gave up a lot of their time to help us. But then with the sell and all the emotions I'm going through, and they're being like, oh my God, I can't do this. I'm selling out. It's wrong what I'm doing. It's what's everyone going to think of me? Because it just goes against what we stand for as a business. We stand for integrity and togetherness, not just me selling out. And Ian, the guy who ran Iris on my advice board, it was almost like he was just started slapping me around the face. Like, and someone's going a bit crazy, just like, snap out of it, man. And he had this massive go at me, and it was exactly what I needed. And he basically just had a go at me saying, no, you took the risk. You started this 15 years ago. You are entitled to do this. And he was like, look, if you're worried about this whole process and the risk involved in selling and what happens, what if you don't sell? And just like what you said before, Peter, like, we joined up with a larger, more financially secure business. Like, you could say that not selling is a risk. So he really kind of like stood me off the ledge in terms of like putting the plug on it all, which was very good of him. I'm very, very grateful to him my whole advisory board.
I want to
Really helpful.
highlight.
You need good people helping you.
I want to highlight that you talked about a few critical things you had and choices you made that, in your view, are very common sense, but it's not that common. So, number one, you had an advisory board. You had people who had been in the seat and position that you wanted to be in, who could help shepherd and guide you, not just through growing the business, but through selling the business, transactions. Number two, you had a managing director running the company. You had someone who was more capable than you in an area of the business that is critical: operations, stabilizing, making sure that the trains show up and run on time. And then the third bit, you had built a quality team that was rooting for you to win, and for the company to win, right? Key people who you could trust to run the business with the new buyer. Those are really critical. And then you put the icing on top of it. You built a new business engine to find new clients. You made the perfect steps to realize the greatest possible value in your exit. Those are the things that are overlooked by a lot of people when trying to sell. So congratulations for that, because that's an important part of what people need to remember when building their businesses. Those are my takeaways from your journey, which are things that I teach and preach. What are some things that were key takeaways, if you were to highlight one or two or three, that you could go back and say, hey, younger Trenton, it's going to be okay. Here's why. What would those things be?
About what it's going to be okay. I mean, it's just that it is going to be fine. You're not curing cancer here. It's all going to be okay. I think it's interesting what you're saying, going back to those comments. All of those things that I did, it wasn't in order to sell the company. It was just to make the business run well. But that's completely aligned, because people who want to acquire a company want a business that's run well. So all the things that you need to do to run a business well, like, it can naturally lead to that. I think a couple of other things that we did. There are two other things I can think of actually that really helped us. One was because we had this 6 months of loss-making period, budgets were cut to zero. So I had like a talent and operations director, and she had very little to do in this time period, because she's normally recruiting or running initiatives for whatever internal initiatives, and we weren't recruiting, and her budget was cut to zero. It was like, do whatever initiatives you want, but they have to cost zero. So because she had so much time on her hands, she basically documented everything that we'd always wanted to document, which meant that by the time it came to like talking to potential acquirers, we had everything written down. So we had like our 3-year plan in a really nice glossy deck, presented really nicely. We had all our values again in a really nice deck done, because she had so much time. She was like aligning everything, getting all the fonts right, just making everything look perfect. So one thing that's quite hard for an acquirer to do is to understand your business, because they'll come in and they'll meet you and maybe meet your leadership team, and well, how many times can they meet you and chat to you, right? A couple of times, and then they'll look at the numbers, and then but you're like, but the culture, the essence of the business, and you can't explain that, and they can't understand that just from a chat. And as a result of my ops and talent director having so little to do, we had about 15 decks that we could share with the acquirers to help them understand the essence of the business. So because of that down period, we documented everything, but in a really nice way. So that helped hugely. So our loss-making period, not only did it trigger me to make the exit happen, it also kind of set us up, because we got all our ducks in a row because my ops lady had the time to do it. So that was one really good thing. But the other thing that I did, so about 2 years before we sold, maybe 2.5 years before the sale went ahead, we started this client leadership program. So we had a bit of a problem because the likes of Accenture and IBM were starting to invade our industry, and we were starting to pitch against them, which is one of the main reasons our new business fell off a cliff, because they were just wiping up. So when we first identified this was happening, we decided to launch a client leadership program internally. So we did training every Friday morning for half an hour. And attendance was mandatory. Like, unless you were sick or on holiday, you had to be there. You could not book a client meeting at this time, including me. And this program that we ran, it was just this random idea me and my MD had on one of our planning sessions. Like, how do we really lift up the team, because, anytime we need to upsell to a client, or anytime there's a problem with a client, there's a difficult conversation needs happening, or we need to inspire a client, someone from our leadership team would usually have to get involved. Not very scalable. So we started this client leadership program, just making it up as we went along, really. And a year later, revenue from our existing accounts was up by 35%. And that is the reason we didn't go bankrupt, because that year, the revenue from our accounts was flying, it's a third higher than it should have been. At the same time as that, new business was down by 60%. So whilst we were still losing hundreds of thousands of pounds, if we hadn't have started that program, and if we hadn't have seen that increase from our existing clients, we would have gone bankrupt. So investing in the team, like, literally saved the business and then enabled the sale to happen. And that program was so successful, we kept it going until when we sold, and then we even kept it going after we sold. And one thing we noticed when we joined up with the company who acquired us, and we started doing like client work together, and you'd see, like, for maybe like a junior or mid-level consultant from my agency, and they would be like up here with clients, just like smashing it. And their senior client partners, they were fine with clients, as you'd expect, but they were nothing compared to my guys. And that's when we really realized what we'd achieved with this program. It was remarkable.
Hindsight's 2020. If you unpack all the things you did right out of pure survival necessary to make it chutzpah, random ideas and testing, you actually went through the checklist of how to maximize and minimize discount factors. You did everything well. So a wealth of knowledge, experience has been shared today. Thank you so much. What have you been up to since? Because you exited, you went on, obviously you went on sabbatical. You did and I've done a sabbatical before, so I know what this feels like. That can be life-changing. And then you're a best-selling author, Human Power.
Yeah, I wrote a book. So
you wrote a book.
Not about this. So,
you weren't done.
Yeah. So, well, after I left, as I was having the year where I was kind of winding down, I knew that I was leaving, and it took a year to persuade my boss to let me go. I started thinking about what I was going to do next, because it's very hard to know when you're in it. I had no clue what I'd do next, and that scared me a lot. And I realized that the client leadership program that we'd run had been so successful, and from chatting to my other agency buddies, they all have that problem. They all have the problem that their team is really passionate about the work, really good at what they do, but in the moments that matter with clients, they don't necessarily have those skills. So I thought, well, I could run this program to other businesses. So I wrote a book about the skills I teach, which came out a couple of years ago. It's done about 5,000 copies now of the book across print, audiobook, and Kindle. It was a bestseller about a week or so after it came out, so it did all right, which was good. And then I started Team Sturka, my new business, about 3 years ago now, and we've had about 40 businesses go through the program now. So it's a lot more developed than what we did in the agency. We were making it up as we were going along, whereas now it's very structured and formalized. But yeah, it's going all right. 3 years in, took 6 months off while I went traveling, and then came back in September 23. And yeah, it's going all right. We work with agencies. Some of them are as small as 10 people. Others are as large as 10,000 people, literally, or 11,000 people is our largest agency. And they go through the program. It's all about emotional intelligence, people skills, and it's about you all kind of going on a journey together to learn about yourself, understand why you communicate the way you do, and to give you frameworks to be able to apply the way you behave in certain situations, to have difficult conversations with clients, to get win-win outcomes with clients, to build up strong relations with clients, to influence clients, to inspire clients, and so on and so on. So that's what I do now.
It's a fantastic resource. I described the path you had as an agency as transformative, not just for you, but for the people who were involved in it. And now you've extended that service to more teams, more people, more agencies who, and like you said, right, you thanked your team, showed gratitude for them to get you to your exit. The number one thing you can do as an owner, as an agency, is to invest in your people, is to make sure they have the tools to be the best versions of themselves and get from your company from the time that they're giving it as much as possible. And
Yeah,
through your
very
book,
much so.
Human Powered, through the program that you guide and shepherd these agencies through, you're doing that. And I always commend people who practice what they preach, Trenton. So thank you for that.
Thank you. It's very kind of you.
Trenton, as a last sign off here, where can people reach out to you if they have questions and if they're curious about learning more?
Yeah, best place is LinkedIn. There's not many Trenton Mosses out there. There are actually two of us on LinkedIn. So there's me, who runs this client program at Team Stoker in London, and then there's a Trenton Moss who's a network engineer in Salt Lake City. I'm not the network engineer guy.
Easy enough. Trenton, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one.
Cool. Take care. Cheers.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode, and thank you for listening to Agency Acquisitions and Exits. You can find us on Spotify and YouTube. Give us a follow, subscribe, like, comment. We post stories just like this from industry experts on how they sold and acquired agencies. If you know of someone you think should be on the show to talk about their agency journey or their exit, leave us an email in the comments and we'll reach out. We'd love to talk to them. As always, thank you for listening. We appreciate you. Stay safe.